Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Norway Chess 2024. This is an epic chess tournament with a very unique format, with Magnus Carlsen, Hikaru Nakamura, and other incredible chess players participating from top to bottom. This is the fourth round recap, and today the games were unbelievable from start to finish. They literally just ended. It's going to be an energetic recap. Here we go. Time for some games. Hikaru versus Prague. Then we have Firouzja versus Dingley Ren. And we have Fabiano Caruana versus Magnus Carlsen. Amazing lineup of players. We have a rematch of the Women's World Chess Championship, Lei Tingjie versus Zhu Wenjun, that's coming up next. Every game is awesome. So if you have a tendency to skip around, just sit this one through, okay? Have a little bit of patience. Hikaru opens up with pawn to d4, and we have knight to f6, c4, e6, and Hikaru... generally people who play this position with white, they don't really want to go into a Nimzo Indian. I mean, the Nimzo Indian is one of the most reliable weapons with black. What you generally do is you play knight f3 and black commits the pawn here. Hikaru says, let's go. You want a Nimzo? You got a Nimzo. You play the Nimzo move order. It's going to be a Nimzo move order, okay? e3, classical main line castles. Now white has a massive choice. You can play bishop d3, knight f3. I mean, this is one of the most historically explored positions in the Nimzo Indian. It is very, very decent for black. So what they started doing is they started putting the knight on e2. Then black figured out how to equalize there. Then they said, what if I do this first? No bishop. I'm just going to write. Nowadays, you know what they do? They play bishop d2. This is another way to play the Nimzo. There's a lot of different paths that you can take. c5 from Prague. And Hikaru's like, I just want the dark squared bishop. And Prague is like, I don't want you to have a dark squared bishop. I would like to take the dark squared bishop. Otherwise, you're going to have two bishops. Hikaru says, okay, bozo, take the bishop, so I'm going to put my knight there. Prague plays b6. He waits. Bishop's not going anywhere, right? He wants to develop the piece first. Now Hikaru plays d5, seizes central space, and opens up the dark squared bishop. Prague plays bishop a6. Both guys still in theory, b3, and now b5. All right, striking back on the queen side. Hikaru plays queen c2. Prague takes on d5. Now, I guess queen c2 must have been a bit of a surprise. You can't really take on b5 and try to escape with the bishop. Queen a5 is too powerful. But maybe Prague was expecting queen d3. Maybe this is the move he was expecting. And then pawn takes d5 becomes less possible because suddenly your rook becomes hanging in the corner. Now, it's very, I mean, it can become the same thing. But queen c2 takes knight c3, queen c3, and pawn to d6. Prague basically chooses a setup like this, which resembles the Benoni. If you don't know what the Benoni is, that's okay. I will quickly show it to you so you are impressed of my opening knowledge, by my opening knowledge, rather. So let's just say the pawn is on e3, right? And let's even just do something like b5. Okay, look at this kind of structure, yeah? Now let's look at what happens in this game with Prague. Let's look at the center pawns. You see how they kind of preserve? They're kind of similar. Like normally in the Benoni, the bishop is not on a6. Normally in the Benoni, white plays e4 and has a knight on f3 and, you know, frequently plays a4 as well. So it's kind of like a Benoni-esque. It's like a Benoni-ish type of thing. I just realized my peace sounds were muted. Okay, my peace sounds have now returned. I was recording something different. So the peace sounds are now back. Knight to g3 from Hikaru. Knight to d7. Clearly Hikaru, by the way, still not thinking. Still in his prep. At this point, he was going to the confessional booth. You know, they have this thing in the tournament where the players can go and spill all their thoughts. And he was kind of saying, oh, you know, I've got a bunch of prep from the candidates, and I'm going to, you know, play this by going f3, e4, and castling, which is what I'm supposed to do. Queen d2, f3, e4, right? And he's built up this massive time advantage, 37 minutes against Prague with this very powerful structure, and he's going to castle, have a slight edge. And he was just kind of saying like, yeah, I'm kind of bored. I'm just walking around, you know, and I'm trying to, you know, have these conversations. Now he plays a4, very common idea, try to target this pawn. See, Prague really should have left the bishop there, but how can you do that, right? Because then what's the bishop going to do? If you try to activate the bishop, you have to take me, and then I'll probably sneak in another pawn capture before taking the bishop. I'm simply going to be up a pawn, and that's going to be very unpleasant for you. So he goes bishop c8, Hikaru immediately starts attacking the queen side, and Prague misplays. Prague should have just taken on a4, probably put the rook on b8, and then played bishop d7. But Prague allows an advantageous simplification. He allows a massive trade on b5, which he thought is getting him more activity. Suddenly, Hikaru's just winning. He's winning because You can't stop both threats. What am I talking about, right? Let's say something like rook d8. You cannot stop queen g5. You just lose the game. You just lose. You can't stop, like, you go g6. Now, I don't have to take right away, but even this is winning. I can also play, like, a couple of other moves. I can take on a7, by the way, which is completely absurd, and then I'm threatening knight h6 check. So, knight f5, and Prague here's like, all right, I'm relying on this. I'm relying on this dynamite strike, knight takes e4. Now, at this point, I'm turning off the eval bar because we have to work through this together. Hikaru does not know that this position is winning. He just knows that he's under a massive attack. He does not self-pin. Do not self-pin, right? Do not self-pin. Don't do this. And generally putting the king in the center is really dumb because you're going to get attacked. So he goes out to f2. There are no more checks. Black cannot play rook e8, rook e2 because it runs directly into rook e1 and you have to trade everything. And at this point, every endgame is winning for Hikaru. The queen and knight versus queen endgame is winning. The knight versus pawns endgame is winning. The rook and knight versus rook is winning. The highest chance that Prague has of drawing the game is probably rook and knight versus rook. Because he can try to win these pawns, and then maybe, the knight is a very slow piece. Very tricky, but very slow. And rook e5, right? And now Hikaru has to spend time. He does. He spends 45 minutes. What goes through the mind of Hikaru Nakamura when he spends 45 minutes? Well, he goes to the confessional and he tells us about it. He calculated knight to g3 lines. And after queen b3, he thought black had counterplay. He calculated knight to h4, trying to come back to f3. If queen takes b3 in this position, he calculated knight f3, and he thought rook e7 was more accurate than anything taking on the d5 square. The computer disagrees, by the way. Hikaru thought this is winning for white. The engine says queen d3, and this endgame is a draw, which is hilarious. But Hikaru spent all this time calculating, and he came up with the most critical attempt. He tries to refute Prague completely. Queen b6 back. There's a fork. There's a check. We go deep into the endgame. Rook e2 is a discovered attack on the rook and an attack on the queen. And Prague missed the absolute cooler, as the poker players call it, the cooler card. Rook f1. Gangster move, counter-attacking the queen while your queen is hanging because the knight protects it. Rook takes queen, pawn takes, and this. So the best thing that you can get is this endgame, and now Hikaru is winning, but it is 2 pawns for the rook, excuse me, for the knight. Very important, by the way, rook f1, and they repeat, and Hikaru saw this entire line all the way back here. So he saw knight d6, queen b6, knight c4, queen f6, king g1, rook e2, rook f1, rook d2, knight rook f6, rook d5, rook f3, rook d1, rook f1, rook d3, knight to a5, and now Hikaru is going to convert the game. Prague tries to trade off some pawns. Rook d3, Hikaru is completely winning. I mean, he is just up a knight for 1 pawn. It is over. Just a matter of time. Brings his rooks. And then suddenly you're like, what about the knight? Like, the knight's just stuck. Hikaru's got to get the knight back. Suddenly Hikaru's got 25 seconds. What is going on? He can't win. He can't find his way through. Somehow Prague looks like he has a fortress. And now all the pawns are on one side. This must be winning. But Prague is holding it. Hikaru's got 20 seconds. If Hikaru loses his last pawn, it's a draw. Prague is getting closer and closer to holding. He's just not losing his remaining pawns. Rook f5. Where's the win? Where is the win? To be honest with you, the win might be far, far away. Hikaru can't find his way through. We have now passed the 80-move threshold, and he has not made any progress. Prague is fighting. He has been losing for 2.5 hours, but he's saving the game. And here he resigned because he blundered. Rook h5 is basically just checkmate. He had to play king h6, and he is still winning, but this is unfathomably difficult for some reason. I mean, Hikaru's position has been winning for 50 moves, more than 50 moves. And he couldn't find it. He had 45 minutes. By the end of the game, he had less than a minute for like 20 moves. This was absurd. And the winning concept must have been really, really difficult. Like, you think with white, you just gang up on the pawn, you win both pawns, you win the game. But it's not that simple. And Prague unfortunately blunders right at the end. And I mean, that's gotta suck. That really has to suck because he put up such a ridiculous fight. And yeah, I mean, that'll take all your energy. Hikaru wins. Very, very nice game. This is also very nice. God damn, I should have brought a second one. Anyway, very excited for them to be sponsoring today's video, by the way. Okay. Rematch of the Women's World Chess Championship match of 2023. There's no way it was in 22, right? Like, yeah, have you guys, like, lost track of time the last 4 years? You're like, oh, it's oh, I have this little cousin, and suddenly they're like 3 years older than that you thought they were. Like, that thing happened in 2023? No, that was 2021. And the world didn't even exist before 2020. So, anyway, we have another Nimzo Indian. This is their classical game. It becomes a Queen's Gambit declined, and I can just keep clicking the forward button because that's what happened. White went on this minority attack, and it has the 3 pawns versus the 4, minority of pawns, knight c8, knight d6, and white actually had a very nice positional advantage targeting the weak pawn on d5, but somehow she misplayed. I mean, it looked like Lei Tingjie did absolutely everything right. I was joking that the Queen's Gambit declined, obviously. You know, and here black is under severe pressure after something like rook c1. I mean, it kind of looks vague, like where's the play? Well, with white, you just make a couple of improving moves. You play a5, you slowly build up the pressure here, and then you just basically try to break through. Like, you try to, you know, very slowly, methodically maneuver your pieces, and you get in against this blockade. The engine loves the position for white. But that's not what happens, and instead the players repeat moves. It's +1 for white, apparently. The engine loves white's position, but the players just decide we're going to repeat moves. Okay. I mean, Ju Wenjun must be happy. Now she has to basically not lose the Armageddon. Lei Tingjie plays the Jobava London. Because again, 10 minutes for white, 7 for black. Black has draw odds. Queen b3. And you get a position that looks kind of like, you know, a little bit unpleasant for black. But the last time there was a little bit of an unpleasant position for black, she was completely fine. She plays very solidly. She's down 3 minutes. And Lei is a very aggressive player, so she's always looking for a fight. Yet somehow in this game, when she starts looking for a fight, black is just perfectly defended. And very nice counterplay gets created. Lei gets this massive attack, but black is just in time. And it looks like you are going to checkmate your opponent. You're not. You're just not. You cannot configure your knights in any sort of way. Look at this refutation. First, I kick out one knight. You don't take because you're still trying to mate me. So I try to kick out the other knight. And if you come back, I just take a rook. And I just go attack the second one. The sacrifice is simply not good enough. Very nice defensive game from Ju Wenjun. Very, very focused. Kind of like she read her opponent perfectly, like a book. And it's almost as if they played, you know, a match against each other for the ultimate stakes. And there's just a check here, but the king is safe. And Ju Wenjun wins in the Armageddon. She trades the pieces and trades the queens, and here white resigns because these pawns are simply not fast enough. Now, it is instructive, by the way. If this is the position, white is winning. It's actually incredible. So if I shift the pawns up 2 ranks, still defended, this, compared to this, one is a win, one is a loss. Like, it's actually funny how immobile, how poorly a rook defends against 2 pawns. But this is a loss. And Ju Wenjun wins the Armageddon. Now, Humpy Konaru versus Anna Muzychuk. We have another Queen's Gambit decline. She immediately trades, which is like extremely rare, by the way. Immediate exchange Queen's Gambit decline is super rare nowadays. And we just have a very, 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 very normal game. Bishop g5, like some super sideline, and she takes the knight, which is like, what? I've never seen this in my life. E3. And by the way, for whatever reason, Humpy clearly played prep, but somehow she spent 8 minutes here. Maybe she anticipated knight f6 or bishop d6, so she tried to take advantage of this move order. Then she spent another 3 minutes and another 12 taking the knight, which I think she just wanted a completely fresh game. And sometimes you need that, right? You need that. You need to try to be creative, and yeah, Muzychuk just takes over this game. I mean, f5. Humpy, meanwhile, is like, all right, I don't know what to do. g4. Let's just start a fight. I mean, seriously, let us just start an absolute scrap. And here, black needs to play with the pawn to get closer. She plays bishop b4 and trades the bishop to try to relieve white of a defender near the king. That ultimately proves to be the wrong plan. You think you put the knight on c4 and all this good stuff, and now you start bringing the rook and you start bringing the queen. But white is defending, and the engine still prefers black's position, but mostly in an endgame sense, that black will have the pressure in the endgame. Knight goes to f4, all right? Queen goes back to f8. Rook to g1. But Anna continues to fire away. B3, the knight goes to A3, queen B4, but suddenly white is better. Now that little change, the little inclusion of a few of these moves, black needed to play A4 faster. Like right here, she still needed to go A4 to control the movement of the pawn. She never did that. And now we're in an endgame that's probably a draw, but because it's so dynamic and imbalanced, like the openings on both sides are different, the kings are on opposite sides, there's weaknesses all over the board, and let's not forget, now the game is 6 minutes versus 2. I mean, this is an absolute lottery. When the players make it to the 40th move, they gain bonus time. There is no bonus time until the 40th move. I mean, they are literally playing not to run out of time. Black has 88 seconds to make 10 moves. She just spent 24 of them, right? Knight to e5. Suddenly, Humpy is completely in the driver's seat. 59 seconds remaining to make 7 moves. 43 remaining to make 6. Rook g5. She has 18 seconds. She now has 14 seconds remaining to not lose the game on time. She has to make 4 more moves. This is unbelievable. Knight f7. Okay, she does. She shuffles the rook back and forth. Both players have made 40 moves. So now it's just a draw. But they're playing on a bonus time, right? You see the bonus time come in. Rook h1, e4. It's probably still about dynamically equal, but now passed pawns are getting created. And apparently this is a losing mistake. Apparently what you have to do here with white is you have to push the d pawn. And then against rook f3, like let's say here, the king joins this pawn. You needed the pawn further away from the king. It turns out this is completely the wrong pawn. The d pawn would have been moving the king, but you can't move your e pawn. She tries to make preparations to move the e pawn, but it's too late. And the game comes down to one tempo, and Anna Muzychuk wins the endgame because she simply creates 2 passed pawns. That's why d5 was necessary. Take, rook f3, king d4, rook a3. But now you can play d6. And now if the king comes, now you cut off. That is the major difference. Rook a2 to try to play rook d2, king d3 check, king c2 check. And the king can go, well, it's actually not so simple. You probably have to run to c4. Here. This is the idea. And if black plays b5, you take and run the king to c6. What? I mean, a lot of these games just kind of come down to, you know, toss-ups. Like, it's completely absurd, but in this game, Anna Muzychuk gets the job done with black. Now, this game is nuts. The lore about this, there is so much lore about all of these players. Alireza Firouzja was the youngest person to ever become 2,800, okay? He broke Magnus Carlsen's record. He's now 2737. His rating looks like a Boeing jet. And right now, that's not the best thing in the world. But his rating looks like a Boeing jet, right? Ding Liren was a world champion. Since becoming world champion, his record against people rated 27-25 and up. He's played people 27-25 ELO and up, cherry picking because he probably beat somebody rated 27-24. But against people rated 27-25 and higher, Ding has 18 games, 6 losses, 12 draws. He has not won a game against anybody rated over 27-25 since becoming world champion. He and I, he and you, he and literally every single viewer here, by the way, have that same record. That's crazy. Now, in this game, he has a very good advantage. What's the advantage? The advantage is Alireza already played a London in this tournament, and he played it against Fabiano Caruana. And not only did he play it against Fabiano Caruana, the game is the exact same thing. The same exact game. Alireza repeats, move by move, the game of Fabiano Caruana that he played already once. That game was crazy. In that game, black played c4. Alireza went queen d1, then black went knight h5, then it was gh, bishop h4, king f1, bishop d3, takes. Crazy game ensued. Crazy. King g2, like crazy game. Alireza was better, then he, missed the chance. Fabiano found an incredible defense. So we get to this position. The bishop is under attack. Ding plays the wrong move order. He plays knight h5 before he plays c4. And now the difference is that Alireza does not have to go to d1 because he's up a knight. In the game against Fabiano, c4 was first. You cannot go queen a4 because of b5. And if you take, bishop c2 traps the queen on the outskirts of the board. That is the difference. But in the game, Ding plays knight h5. He spent 6 minutes. He mixed up the move order. And the problem now is queen a4, b5 doesn't work because bishop c2, you save your knight. You save the knight. And the bishop is hitting the rook. There is no queen trap. That is the difference. The knight would have come back in the Fabiano game, but there's no knight anymore because you lost it. So Ding plays the wrong move order and is suddenly in a completely different game. Again, I will remind you, the Fabiano game looked like this. The queen was here and the king was here. The Ding game looks like this, which is completely different. And Alireza has to think on his own. He doesn't remember everything, but he simply wins the pawn back and he's a pawn up. And not only is he a pawn up, he has the attack. He's what we call, he's up a pawn with the compensation. So this is a crazy turn of events. Ding tried to prepare exactly what happened in this tournament 2 days ago, and he mixes up the move order. So now Alireza's in cruise control. Ding has to, like, I mean, the engine is saying he has to play h6. He tries to create counterplay immediately, but it's not the first mistake in chess that sometimes kills you. It's the second one. The second one is trying to get into a fight with a guy like Alireza. When he is on, when he is confident, d-e, f-e, bishop h6, the attack is launched. He is now 2 pawns up. He's 2 pawns up, and rook g7 is game over. So Ding plays this move, king f8. Alireza plays queen e4, and now Ding has to just come back to f6. You may be wondering, the threat is here. Why would Alireza go here? He's attacking the bishop, right? So the bishop has to come back, threatening this. Then white takes this pawn, right? Then Ding has to play here, giving up his rook completely. But rook f8 traps the queen, which is nuts. I don't think Alireza would have gone for this. He probably would have gone for, frankly, I'm not sure, by the way, because that might be the only thing you can go for. So maybe he wouldn't have taken on h7. He would have played bishop back to g5. In any case, the third mistake from Ding, he takes on h3 to defend the bishop, and Alireza just goes directly into the position. I mean, queen f1 is scary, queen h1 is scary, but the king is always safe. You can lose everything because you're going to win everything right back. Here, queen g6, bishop g5, he trades the piece. He's up 3 pawns. Queen g6 and king c2. No checks. Rook is coming. They play a few more moves. Ding Liren resigns. Ding Liren is now 7 losses and 12 draws against people rated 27, 25, and higher since becoming world champion. And perhaps the craziest statistic of all, he's now no longer the #1 player from China. It's Wei Yi. I think Wei Yi has a higher rating. I think Ding is down to number 11 in the world. This is unfathomable. I mean, and Alireza was not even happy. Alireza went to the post-game press conference and said, it doesn't even feel good to win like this because clearly something is off about Ding right now, and I hope he gets better. What is happening to our world champion? Why do we even need a world champion format? Can we just do what tennis does? Please, FIDE, I am begging y'all. I did an interview with the CEO. I know that's not really how it works. You don't just do an interview and then they start doing stuff. Maybe this is not the right format. I don't know. The lineal world champion stepped away because he doesn't like the format. And we got a crazy situation here. I just hope Ding rights himself for the match against Gukesh. And also, this puts a lot of pressure on Gukesh. Because Gukesh is like, what's happening to my opponent, right? Oh my goodness. I don't know. Firouzja wins, by the way. Firouzja played a fantastic game. But he wasn't even happy about the game. Now, Pia Kramling versus Vaishali. This one, a Grunfeld. Vaishali is playing an opening nobody's playing anymore. I mean, Grunfeld was one of the most reliable openings for like 30 years. And nobody plays it anymore because it's too risky and everybody plays kind of queen's pawn stuff. She plays into a main line, c5, bishop e3. All this has been played before. Knight c6. There's no d5. It looks good, but queen a5 is a quick counterplay. You got to know what you're doing in the Grunfeld. It is a very, very sharp opening, very convoluted. And you can tell, you know... Can I just check something? Oh, yes. Okay. They all started with the same amount of time. I thought for a second they started with less time. Vaishali creates a lot of counterplay. What ultimately happens in the Grunfeld very often is you go to an endgame, and as you see here, that's exactly what's happened. Black has a pawn each with white on the queen side and a slightly better pawn structure on the king side. So black has attacking chances, and black has chances in the endgame. Queen e3, and now black is going to try to grind this game down. So now we have a queen and rook endgame. I mean, it's very boring, and we are heading for a draw. F3. Even with this really bad structure, it's really tough for, like, the pawns are, you know, you can't, how are you going to win a pawn? You're going to play rook here, rook d5, right? So, king g4, and we shuffle a bit. White can't really make progress, but neither can black. So we're shuffling. By the way, the players have made it past move 40. Now they're going to agree to a draw. Rook d3, rook d2. Okay, this is getting a little spicier. This is getting a little spicier. So clearly, Pia decided I'm okay losing my pawn as long as I win that one and that one. Rook e2. What? Well, as it so happens, she had to go there and there. She actually had to respect the a-pawn. She takes first and then tries to get over there, but she can't. She doesn't have the time. If here, king c5, rook a8, and the king just joins the pawn, it's just lost. It's completely lost. Why? Like, let's say white plays f4, rook f6. You just simply cannot make any progress. You play king f4, I play rook b6. I don't allow a check, and now let's say king here or something, like, I don't know. There is rook b5, and I'm holding the pawn, and then there's rook a5, and you're just not fast enough. Something like here, a2, rook d1, queen, take. You think, oh, easy. No, you lose. You just lose. You can't get your king out, so you just lose. And yeah, Pia just kind of autopiloted FE, thinking, okay, we trade and I get my rook around, but she actually had to get the rook around immediately. And now she's just lost. She's completely lost. It's kind of nuts. Like, almost 2 games in a row. Like, yesterday, Pia had a game also. It was just like her opponent made a one-mover very late in the game, and that's it. It's over. Vaishali wins. Vaishali won this game at 99% accuracy. I mean, she just kind of played in equal position. She looked for her chances. And Vaishali's just dominating this tournament. She's won multiple games in a row. And yeah, this is a crazy idea. Rook here. And the point is like, okay, black will take on f5. You go here, and a2. And now you play king f4. And if black tries to run the king to the pawn, you take. Black tries to run the king to the pawn. You play f4, king g5. I don't think it actually matters. Maybe this matters. It does matter. Ah, check and rook a5. Yes, it does matter. You have to go here. Very important. Because otherwise there was check and this defense, the shield. And now this is a draw. So there's tricks. That's what she had to do. She doesn't do it, and she goes down, and Vaishali wins again. Vaishali is crushing the tournament, by the way, in first place. And that brings us to our main event of the evening. World number 1, world number 2. Magnus's closest rival over the last decade in classical chess, bar none. And the only man that he has ever verbally stated is the second, best player in the world, clearly. D6, and now the players play a sideline. This position has been reached quite a bit. Now, generally, rook e1 is played, and, black has castle, but they trade off their bishops. They hate their bishops. Bishopless position. And just equal. Definitely some interesting nuances of the pawn being on c3, the knight being on c6. Will white expand? Will black play for b5? This is also a little bit of an imbalance. It's not a commentator-friendly game. It's not a recap-friendly game, but there was definitely some nuances here as Magnus advanced on this side of the board. The knight went back to h2, knight to f7, knight to g4, and, Fabiano advanced in the center of the board. Magnus struck back, but for the most part, I mean, it's just sort of in the balance. Like, c4 locks the position, needs rerouting. Now we get a repetition of moves. And Magnus says, no, let's keep playing a little bit. b3. Okay, we trade. The b-pawn is weak. Magnus says, you can take it. I'll take on c3. Fabi says, maybe not so fast. Okay, now let's do it. Now knight f3. By the way, you cannot take this pawn. I mean, that's not really what you cannot take this pawn without losing your own. So black can wait, but takes. And now suddenly the game does get a little bit spicy, right? Now Magnus is kind of asking some questions. Can I attack you over here? What am I, Queen comes back to d3. Magnus says, no, I'm going to keep my queen on the board. Knight f3, rook d8, knight h5. I mean, admittedly, it does look scary. So Fabi says, let's trade queens. Magnus says, no. 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 Leave me alone. And now they both make their 40th move. And we trade. It is still only Magnus asking the questions. He has the active knight. He has the active queen. He has the active rook. Throughout this game, Hikaru was going to the confessional booth, and he was so annoyed. He was like, Magnus is doing the thing that he always does, right? And actually, Magnus himself was saying, like, he lost yesterday to Prague, and he decided today he's just going to make a draw. He's going to make a draw. But as this game is going on, and he's being solid, he's like, I might as well play. We both have 5 minutes. It's getting very nervy. He's, this is sort of vintage Magnus. King h2 attacks the knight. Now rook d2. Whoa, that's kind of a wild move. Fabi, is under a lot of pressure here. it's not easy to find a move. Like, where do you move with white? Let's say you try to attack the queen, you lose everything. I mean, you lose all your pieces. If knight here, maybe you can get the king off the back rank, but even something like rook c1, queen b4, just queen e3 something. I mean, you're just losing all your pieces. So rook d1 is on the way. It's not easy to stop. If you try to trade pieces, I fork you. That's game over. Queen b4, oh, queen e3. Every move has a concession. So this is the best we're gonna get. Rook d2. If you take with the queen, you lose everything. Knight f1. So you take, and knight f1 the other way as well. So you take this, check, and this. And at this point, it becomes painfully clear what has happened. Magnus has Fabiano exactly where he wants him. And it's a queen endgame with a pass pawn, and within a few moves, both guys are going to get to about 2 minutes. Magnus starts advancing, king h6, and realizes, I'm going to make a run for it. And he thought practically this position is winning, but it's just a draw, according to the engine. Queen d4, king f4. That is a wild move. That is vintage Magnus Carlsen. King to f4. The king is going to cross over, and the pawn is going to be supported by the queen and the pawn. This pawn is irrelevant. Queen takes g7, king to e3. There is only one move here that draws. It is so counterintuitive. It makes sense when you explain it, but everything here is losing for white except one move. And Fabi finds it. King to g1. He finds this move with 20 seconds on the clock. The point is to hide the king. It's to not get hit with anything on the back rank and to avoid mate threats. Pawn to e4. Believe it or not, you cannot trade queens. This is a losing endgame. King to f2, king d3. It actually doesn't matter. King d2 and I advance. Here, and this is why you have to learn your king and pawn endgames. Because this is a draw. But you can move the pawn, and then you lose. I just make a queen before you run out of moves. So, e4, Fabi goes queen h6, king e2, and actually this is discovered check. This was the idea. This is still a draw. By some sort of miracle, the engine is drawing this, but Magnus believed that by all practical chances, this game is over for white, and it is. The only move here that draws is this. I don't even know how that draws, because e2, queen f7, king e1. Fabiano got here in his head and could not find a move. Well, the move is, how does black push the pawn? King to d2, you just check. King d1, you just check. It's not just checking, okay? You basically keep your queen on the outskirts. You force the king in front of the pawn, and you wait. You don't just wait from anywhere. You don't wait from there, because king f1, you have to wait from where the king is accessible on the diagonal and the straightaway. You have to wait on f5, which is... And Fabi does not find that. I think at this point he was already a bit rattled, e2, and you just lose. There is no check. There's no check. There's nothing. You can play queen here. I play check, check, and mate. It's nuts. Nuts. And Magnus wins. Magnus wins, and that is the final game of the day. And your standings, first of all, Fabiano is 28.03. Magnus back up to 28.27. Hikaru 27.98. I thought he crossed, but he didn't. Not yet. These are your standings for the women. Vaishali is dominating, but remember, to win in classical is 3 points. So if Jun wins and Vaishali loses, it's 9 versus 8.5. That is very exciting. And then these are your standings for the men. Ding Liren, that is painful to see. If he wins a game, he's back up to 5.5, but it's Hikaru leading the tournament. Firouzja with a massive win. And Magnus Carlsen back up there with a win in classical chess. Crazy. Very tight race, this one. And that's all I have for you today. Friendly reminder, and thank you to all who have checked out the Patreon, the Road to Grandmaster, as well as I just uploaded a 1-hour educational puzzle tutorial on there. Shout out to those of you that have subscribed. Link is in the description. And normally at this point, all the viewers drop off and go somewhere else. But if you're still here, check out that video. I'll see you for round number 5. Get out of here.